Hey guys, what's going on? Jeb here, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you a chart that predicts a $93,000 Bitcoin in the next 24 months. That means that the stock-to-flow ratio is going to be increasing the underlying intrinsic value of Bitcoin, and thereby predicting that Bitcoin should go on a major rally up to close to $100,000 in the next 2 to 3 years. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down the stock-to-flow ratio, and I'm going to be showing you why it predicts a $93,000 Bitcoin and why we should actually listen to that prediction. Guys, we have a lot to get into in today's video, and I think you're really going to enjoy today's video. Even if you already know about stock to flow, I encourage you to watch this video anyway. This is a great review, especially with a halving coming up. But anyway, guys, before we dive on into it, if you do enjoy today's video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Really helps out the channel when you do that. And without much further ado, guys, let's go ahead and dive right on into it. Guys, there's something I want to point out to you, and that is that over the last several months, have you noticed that Bitcoin tends to be stabilizing somewhere around this price? Somewhere in between like $7,500 to around $9,300. Bitcoin has dropped. Obviously, we had this consolidation pattern with an uptrend right here. Bitcoin fell, and ever since then, we've had our ups and we've had our downs, but in general, Bitcoin tends to be stabilizing in between $7,000 and $9,000. Well, you might be wondering to yourself, Jeb, why is that? Well, I'll tell you, a big part of the reason why Bitcoin is stabilizing around $8,000 to $9,000 is because Bitcoin's stock-to-flow ratio is predicting an $8,000 to $9,000 Bitcoin. As you guys can see here, we have our stock-to-flow 365-day moving average here on the stock-to-flow chart for Bitcoin. And as you can see right here, I'm trying to point to it with my mouse, but I can't because on my mouse right here, it says $8,230. Would you notice the price of Bitcoin? $8,443. Those two numbers seem relatively similar, yes? Well, you would think that because it's true. But let's back up a minute. What is stock to flow? Pretty simply, guys, let's go up here to a clean part of the chart. Pretty simply, stock equals the circulating supply of Bitcoin. So that's the circulating supply. The flow equals the amount of Bitcoin that is produced every single day. That is kind of the blockchain income of Bitcoin, if you will. The amount of Bitcoin that are generated every single day. Currently, that's around 1,800 Bitcoin per day. So if you take this number up here, the circulating supply of Bitcoin, which over on TradingView is around 18 million Bitcoin, and you set up a ratio with the amount of Bitcoin that is being produced every single day, then what do you have? Well, you have a ratio, and that ratio is called the stock-to-flow ratio. And the stock-to-flow ratio is very important, not just in Bitcoin, but also in precious metal markets, because generally, guys, the more scarce that something is, the more it's going to be worth. That's simple supply and demand economics. When the amount of something that is in demand goes down, the value of that product or commodity, or in this case, Bitcoin, goes up. And when less Bitcoin is being produced every single day, which means that there's less money being made by the miners, which means that there's less money in Bitcoin, I should say, being injected into the crypto economy, it means that the value of Bitcoin generally trends to the upside. That is a trend that has been shown for the majority of the history in Bitcoin. I'm gonna go ahead and scoot myself on over here. There we go, so that you guys can actually see this. This chart, as you can see, it's a stock to flow chart, and it also has a price action chart of Bitcoin laid over it. If you use that ratio on stock to flow, you can calculate what the underlying value of Bitcoin should be based on that stock to flow ratio. And as you can see, if we turn our price off here on Bitcoin, then you can see what the stock to flow ratio was predicting Bitcoin would be worth for the entire history of Bitcoin since its inception. And as you can see, over the last year or so in 2019, it's been predicting around an $8,000 Bitcoin. Where did we stabilize? As you can see on this chart here, guys, Bitcoin would go below the stock to flow ratio and then above the stock to flow ratio. Then we got support on the stock to flow ratio around $6,000 back in 2018. We fell below it, we rallied above it, and eventually, as you can see, over the last 2 years, we've been bouncing up and down, above and below it, and we stabilized finally around $8,000. That's because the stock-to-flow ratio is one of the best metrics that we can use to predict the underlying intrinsic value of Bitcoin. But there's a twist, and that twist is that whenever a halving happens, which you can tell by the color change here, when we get very, very, very blue here, I'm colorblind, so this all looks like the same color to me, that means that a halving is coming up. And you notice how Bitcoin's starting to get kind of blue here. It means that there's a halving coming up in May of this year. From the time of recording this video, in about 106 days, there is going to be a halving on Bitcoin, which means that the income, if you will, of Bitcoin on the blockchain for the entire crypto economy is going to be cut in half from 1,800 Bitcoin a day to 900 Bitcoin a day, which if you work out the math, that roughly increases the stock to flow value of Bitcoin by an order of magnitude. That's 10 times. As you can see right now, stock to flow is predicting just over an $8,000 Bitcoin, which is where we've stabilized. And a couple years from now, after that halving has gone through, and after there's a lot of history on it, over a year of history with that halving, stock to flow predicts close to $100,000 Bitcoin. And right here in May of next year, it predicts a $93,000 Bitcoin. Now I want to make one thing very clear. Just because Stock to Flow predicts a $93,000 Bitcoin, and just because Stock to Flow has been one of the best predictors of Bitcoin price action, at least generally, in the last 10 years, does not necessarily mean that we're going to $93,000 in the beginning of 2021. What it means is that Bitcoin should be worth $93,000 there. So if we're below $93,000, then you can expect the bulls to be quite strong, and if we're above $93,000, you can expect the bears to be a little stronger. A good example of that would be back here in 2016 and 17. Notice how Bitcoin started a major rally soon thereafter the halving back in 2016. And for the next 2 years or so, Bitcoin rallied all the way up to $20,000. For a majority of the time that Bitcoin was in rally here, it was below the stock to flow value prediction. And what that means is that every single time Bitcoin had a little correction in here, it wouldn't last more than 45 to 60 days or so, and we'd go on and set a new all-time high. That's because we had gone into a bull market post-halving. Post is very important. Right now, we're pre-halving, guys. You can't be in the pre-game and be expecting for the after party to be starting. And that's just not how it works. We haven't even started yet, guys. We got a little bit of time to get there before the halving happens. And as you guys know, that halving is happening in a little over 3 months. And when it does, that is not necessarily on the day or even on the weekly going to be significant, but in the long term, that's going to be huge. As you guys will know, when the halving happens, we're going to cut down from 12.5 coins being mined per block to 6.25. It's going to drastically change the landscape of miners. It's going to affect fee calculations and the difficulty and the block time. It's going to affect everything, but most importantly, it's going to affect the income of the cryptocurrency space, if you will, again, and thereby it's going to affect the stock to flow ratio, which will then affect the price action. What this means is you should not be expecting Bitcoin to blow up to $100,000 the day the halving happens. That's not what I'm saying. In fact, quite the opposite, guys. When the halving happens, I'll tell you something, it's probably going to be pretty boring. And in fact, that's why people say, oh, the halving's already priced in. No, the halving is not priced in. The problem with the halving is, it's not really a problem, it's just a fact of the halving, is that the effects that it have are ultra long-term compared to our day trader mindset when Bitcoin is making moves here on the daily chart. The halving doesn't care about that. The stock to flow ratio doesn't really affect the very short term. Short-term fluctuations are more or less just random noise when you look at this longer-term chart here. But what it does mean is that when Bitcoin has the halving, we can start to expect more and more and more bullish buying pressure to be pushing us to the upside as the years go by. This is not a short-term video. This is not short-term analysis. But I'll tell you something, it is very important. We've got about 100 days before the halving happens, and when the halving does happen, you can expect there to be more bullish buying pressure, and you can expect for Bitcoin to start to rally again, even if that happens in August, September, October, November, December next year. It might not happen right away, but it does mean that we can expect Bitcoin to continue to rally here on into the next several years, which, if you're like me, that means invest. That means dollar cost average. That is not financial advice. That's simply what I'm doing. I've been dollar cost averaging every single Friday for a long time now, and I'm very happy about it because those Bitcoin that I've been buying are going to be worth quite a bit more after the halving comes in a couple years down the road. So guys, do what you will with this information, but I want you to be aware of the stock to flow ratio. Look up Bitcoin stock to flow, and you'll find the website that we were just looking at. It's one of those metrics. It's one of those like crypto economics that you need to understand, and it applies to a lot of things as well. It's not just Bitcoin. You can apply it to your altcoins. You can apply it to gold and silver and platinum and other commodities like grain, copper, iron, anything. If you're trying to get a value for something, stock to flow is actually a very, very good way of getting it. It's why grain might go for, I don't know, I don't trade commodities, maybe $1 a bushel, I don't have any idea. But grain is worth a lot less for its weight than gold is because gold is so much scarcer. Stock to flow in its essence is designed to measure the scarcity and thereby the value of a commodity. So guys, it's something that you want to be aware of, it's something that you want to understand, and when CT2A is updated, I'm probably going to be making a video specifically on stock to flow for it, so check us out down there. Anyway guys, before we go, I do just want to say a few things here about the Bitcoin chart. First of all, Bitcoin does look like it's trying to bounce here on the 20 daily EMA, and like I said a couple videos ago guys, Bitcoin has a decent chance of bouncing on the 20 EMAs, and if it does, I'm perfectly happy with that. I'm not going to complain if Bitcoin doesn't go down to $7,800. I'd be perfectly content with Bitcoin rallying up above $9,400 right now. I'm not totally convinced it's going to happen, but we shall see. That moving average, excuse me, not that moving average, that consolidation pattern that we were talking about yesterday has now been broken bullish out of, so that's a good thing. If Bitcoin manages to have a bounce in here and rally above $9,200 with the bears having their day and the bulls not being exhausted, I'm okay with that. We'll be doing some more analysis on that tomorrow, but I want to talk about stock to flow today. But anyway, guys, speaking of today, that is going to have to do it for today's video. But before I go, I do, as always, want to thank each and every single last one of you for watching, as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.
Oh, I got a real good feeling.